Last time, we saw Esther royally crowned, and just an amazing story in that she's just an orphan. Just a foreigner, just an orphan child, and just a nobody, but yet God has promoted her. And she is the one that has practiced the royal law. She's got the royal crown on her royal head. She's practiced the royal law, and she had obtained, we saw last week, she had obtained favor. Verse 15 and verse 17, she had obtained the favor of man and the favor of God. And who does God say obtains that favor? He says that it's those who have mercy and truth written on the tables of their hearts. And she obtained favor. So that means that she had His mercy and His truth written on her heart. And that goes right along with 1 Peter chapter 3, where we're told that it's not about the outward adornments, especially with the ladies. It's not about the outward adornments of the hair and the apparel and the gold. No, it is the hidden man of the heart that is in the sight of God of great price. And that perfectly describes Esther, because we're told that Esther declined the extravagant beauty treatments that are available to this possibly up to 400 young ladies vying for this role. We're told that Esther is the one that accepted just the bare minimum and was all right with that. Why? Because what mattered to her was in the heart. It was not the outward adornments. It was the mercy and the truth that were written in her heart. And that's why she had the favor of God, and she becomes the queen of Persia. She becomes the queen of the preeminent world empire. So what next? What happens next? All right, chapter 2, verse 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. We covered that last week. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai like as when she was brought up with him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So the king threw another feast, another big party, another big bash, this time in honor of Esther. Well, that kind of fits because he's the party boy. The book opens with, he loves parties, and he's having 6-month parties. This is the party guy. One of the reasons for throwing a huge gala and a huge bash here is that, perhaps one of the reasons is that they have suffered concerning losses in Greece. Greece is this rising threat. A great way to keep public morale high when it could be going down in the tanks and would be to have hey, let's celebrate and let's have a big occasion. Perhaps that's one of the reasons for the big feast. But really the main reason is, you talk about a giant event. You talk about pomp and circumstance. We saw pomp and circumstance in chapter 1. Here you have two events that are always a big deal on their own, and now they're rolled into one. A wedding is a big deal. A presidential wedding is a big deal. But here you have a queen's coronation and a king's wedding rolled into the same event. So just multiply the pomp and circumstances. If you like U.S. history, a little bit of trivia would be that there's one president who was married in the White House, and that was Grover Cleveland in the 1880s. There was one other president who was married while in office, but the wedding didn't take place at the White House. Cleveland's wedding did. He was 49 years old, and he married a 21-year-old. You'd think, wow, that must have been like a huge occasion. He wanted it to be very small. There were only 28 guests. His brother was the officiant, He paid for it himself out of his own pocket. He didn't want it to be a huge spectacle. Ahasuerus, on the other hand, wanted it to be a huge spectacle. He wanted it to be a big deal. He made it a national holiday. And he makes a release under the provinces. Perhaps that is a release of mandatory military service. And so these would-be drafted soldiers are going, sweet, we don't have to go through basic training. We don't have to face a drill instructor. We're excited about that. Maybe a release of taxes and getting a break on some of those things. But really the main reason is to show off Esther. Because the whole selection process has been private. It's been behind closed doors. This is the general public. This is the Persian Empire's first opportunity to meet their new queen. And he's pleased with the decision that he's made. He wants to show her off. And it seems that perhaps he learned something from the Vashti ordeal, and so he appears to be showing her off a little bit more tastefully than last time, and with a little bit more decorum this time around. But the interesting thing here is that with the Queen of Persia, she's not just a figurehead. It would appear that there are some political. She's a bit of a politician in her own right. In that it appears that there were some spoils to be had that go along with assuming this office, including appointments to government posts. The spoils, that's the spoils system. And when a new president comes in, there's appointees that you put your people in place, and you get your people into your administration, and that it coincides, her ascension, her coronation coincides with Mordecai sitting in the king's gate. So Mordecai assumed a government post. The king's gate would be like City Hall. In ancient times, that is the place of the courts. That is the place of the administrative affairs of the kingdom and the official goings-on of the kingdom. And so Mordecai here, upon Esther's elevation, he is elevated as well. And Mordecai becomes a statesman of sorts himself. Not sure exactly how high-ranking, but he has filling this government post. And it's not, well, that's just nepotism. Well, it's the spoils. Well, that's just nepotism. You still have to be able to discharge the duties that are required of that office. Mordecai, remember when Esther was in preparation for 12 months, Mordecai walked every day to check on her. So where was she being held? In the places of all the governmental goings-on. So Mordecai's a fixture there. He has established himself as a staple person amongst City Hall, so he's made connections, and he's won some friends himself, and he is respected himself, and he is distinguished himself, and so he's a natural fit for this position that he's in. Our title tonight is God Saved the King. God saved the king, and by that I do not mean his eternal soul in the sense of eternal salvation. I mean it more in the sense of the national anthem of the United Kingdom. Probably Brother John has that memorized, I'm guessing. God said that's but what they mean by that, and this king would be physically saved. He would be preserved, and God would use Mordecai to thwart this assassination attempt on his life, to foil this attempt on his life. And that, an assassination attempt being foiled, can completely and radically change the course of history. Let me give you an example of that. In 1939, there was a German carpenter named George Elser, and George Elser had brilliantly foreseen of some of the evils that the direction that Adolf Hitler was going in and where they would lead. And he was willing to resort to violence in order to prevent that. Hitler had given a speech at the Munich Beer Hall in November several years in a row. By 1939, by November, Hitler had already marched on Poland, but it was announced that he would be giving his regular annual speech in November at the Munich Beer Hall as he had many times before. So Elser, here's what he did. He scouted out that auditorium every night for a month. And he learned every nook and cranny and every inch of that building so that he could take out Adolf Hitler in 1939. He built a bomb. And his plan was to put the bomb in one of the pillars holding up the building. So every day he went to the location and hollowed out the pillar himself with a tool and then put the debris from the pillar into his own suitcase. And when he was finished, conspicuously walked out of the building holding a suitcase, nobody knowing what it contained, so that he can make a place for his bomb. And the day of the speech came around, and the bomb was built, and it was set to a timer. Well, the timer was set to 73 minutes because he had done his homework, and every year that Hitler had given a speech at the Munich Beer Hall, it was approximately 73 minutes. So that's what he timed the bomb to. Well, little did he know, on this particular occasion, due to weather and other circumstances, Hitler finished his speech at 60 minutes rather than 73. So the bomb did go off. The bomb did take out the pillar, which did bring down the part of the ceiling under which Hitler had stood, but it was just a little bit late, and Hitler had already left the building completely, and the building had mostly cleared out, and Hitler would live. And Hitler would go on to do the things that he had done. Well, that's a great endorsement of the value of brevity for a public speaker, and perhaps something that preachers like myself, maybe you might save your life if you just cut it about 13 minutes short or so. But I normally don't shoot for 73 minutes myself. But really, the main thing, though, is look at how monumentally one foiled assassination, one thwarted assassination attempt can radically alter the course of human history for the whole world for hundreds of years, for good or for bad. And that's what we just read about. Not with the same impact. You think about Paul. Remember Paul's nephew? Paul had all these co-conspirators that had said, we're not going to eat until we kill this guy. But God put Paul's nephew right in the perfect time and place for him to overhear their conspiracy and blow the whistle to just the right person who had just the right amount of power to get Paul out of Dodge. That one thwarted assassination attempt on Paul is one of the reasons we have 13 to 14 books of the New Testament. That Paul was still, not that he had already written some of it prior to that point, but we get the rest of Paul's ministry because of that thwarted assassination. Number one, so God saved the king, number one, via Mordecai's integrity. Via Mordecai's integrity. Working at City Hall put Mordecai right there around the other bureaucrats, the other officials, the other chamberlains here. And so that's what tips him off to this plot to assassinate the king. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time, just like Paul's nephew, and just like, I guess you could say Hitler, but just at the right place in the right time, in my opinion, to intercept written messages. And I believe it would have been written because suppose he only overheard their discussion about the plans that they were concocting, their diabolical plans to kill a man, to kill the king. If all he had done was hear them, then it would just be his word against theirs. But we do know that they're apprehended and they're convicted and they're executed. So there had to be some kind of evidence proving that Mordecai, it wasn't just his word against theirs. There had to be something written. There had to be some proof. So I would suggest, or at least theorize, that he intercepted some sort of written document. And so don't you love how you could not have scripted this any better? You talk about the perfect name for a thug, a goon, Big Thin. One of these guys' names was Big Thin. He was a security guard. He was a security guard who kept the door. That was his job. And boy, I mean, that is the quintessential name for a goon. I picture goon. It's somebody named Big Thin, and I would guess that whatever you're picturing is spot on. Whatever you have in your mind, that's probably exactly what Big Thin looks like. And I mean, one of the requirements to be effective if you're an assassin would be stealth. I mean, of all the requirements, that you be untraceable. Wouldn't that be the main requirement, that you not have your steps found out, that you leave no trail behind? Well, surprise, surprise. Bigthan and Teresh are a bit clumsy, and they're sloppy and inattentive to detail, and they're oafs. They're exactly what they sound like. They're big oafs, and but it's, why would they be so wroth? Hey, this king's a party boy. He's sending gifts to everybody. He's getting everybody drunk. Why are they wroth with King Ahasuerus? Well, there's several possibilities. Maybe they were double agents for the Greek government, because we know Persia's at war with Greece. It's possible they were double agents for the Greek government. It seems, though, that their wrath against the king is timed up with Esther's ascension to the throne. There's something about Esther's coronation that is timed up with their plot to kill the king. Perhaps they had ties to Vashti. Perhaps they had ties to Vashti, and now that she is officially replaced, they are bitter, just like the house of Saul and Shimei had been bitter against the line of David, because the line of David replaced the line of Saul for the throne. And maybe their line, the Bigthan and Teresh, perhaps, they had a girl in the running themselves who wasn't chosen. Perhaps one of them had a sister or a daughter or a niece. Persian tradition was that when the king would choose a wife, he would choose a wife from among the 7 noble families of Persia. Well, Esther's not from among the 7 noble families of Persia. She is a Jew. And so maybe these men thought, well, my horse in this race was much more qualified and much more deserving, and got robbed. And that took any royalty out of our family line. So they're filled with rage over that, or sour grapes over their candidate not winning. Whatever the reason was, I can kind of picture, if I ponder what it may have looked like, the situation whereby Mordecai discovered their plan. He's at work at City Hall, and he walks into the break room for lunch one day. And maybe it went like this, maybe it didn't, but it's lunchtime, so he puts his bagels and lox, or whatever a Jew might munch on at lunch, and while it's heating up, he chooses a table, and it just happens to be the table where these chamberlains were drawing up their plans and concocting and orchestrating every step of their evil plot to take out the king. And it just so happens that they, in their sloppy, clumsy inattention to detail, left their notebook right there on the table where Mordecai happens to be sitting. And Mordecai glances down and what is this? And starts paging through it and realizes this is legit, this is real. All of these school shooters, usually they've got written plans somewhere. And they've got their steps listed out, and it's Columbine and Sandy Hook, and you find all the written plans. And to pull this off, it's got to be orchestrated, choreographed. It's got to be planned. You're going to forget the plan if you don't write it down. So perhaps Mordecai found it and looked at it and says, this is real. I mean, they're going to do this. And technically, the king is now his son-in-law. I don't want that to happen. And so he's got that. But what does he do? Does he keep it? And again, this may not be how it went down, but in something like that, if he takes it, whatever written evidence he discovered, if he takes it and they realize it's gone, they're going to come back to get it, and they're going to know that they're found out. And then they're going to be harder to catch. So if I were Mordecai, I would copy it down as fast as I could and make a replica and leave the original, so when they double back for it, they can have it, and then they won't know that he's onto them. And then he's got something to furnish to say, hey, I found these 2 guys with this, and if you detain them and search them, you'll find something that looks just like this. We know there was enough evidence to convict. It wasn't just a whim. It wasn't just one person's word against another. They're chamberlains. They keep the door. They're trusted. They have the inside. They know the floor plan. I mean, so that's what perhaps how it may have gone down. But nonetheless, this puts Mordecai in a dilemma, because he's sitting there thinking, but it puts him in a dilemma that requires much courage and much integrity. Because suppose that he blows the whistle and reports this, and the charges don't stick. Suppose he fingers them, and they've got a slick defense attorney and who manages to get them off the hook, and they're free to go, and they find out that he is the snitch. Well, snitches get stitches, don't they? Or at least that's how it's often said. So he's going, that's going to be me getting stitches. Even today, when homicides go unsolved, many of them are unsolved because they're all in the ghetto, where these drug gangs have such a stronghold that when there are any witnesses with any helpful information to investigators, they're not willing to cough it up out of fear of retaliation. If I talk, I'm going to get it. And so they don't talk. And so, but then Mordecai's also, yeah, but what if I don't say anything? What if I don't say anything? They go through with it, they kill the king, and I knew about it and I did nothing. Well, that makes me, if I knew about it and sat on it, that makes me an accomplice to murder in the sight of God. And I cannot have that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to feed this information to Esther, but I'm going to be very discreet about it. He's going to say, look, Esther, you certify this and get this registered in the Chronicles and get this written down, and I'm willing to have my name attached to it in writing because I'm willing to be put my own safety at risk in order to confront evil and prevent evil. So I am willing to have my name attached to it. I'm not afraid of that. However, be discreet. Be discreet. Don't make any bigger deal of it than is necessary. Don't call any more attention to it than is necessary, because in case they do get off, or in case they do have third or fourth or fifth co-conspirators and they're coming for me because I'm the snitch, I would rather not have this a huge thing. So I'm willing to have my name on the books, but don't make a huge thing of it. Be discreet. Well, that works out perfectly because Esther has already exemplified the virtue of discretion. She's just the person to handle this matter discreetly. So it tells us the outcome. The inquiry is made into their crimes. The evidence that Mordecai and Esther had furnished is deemed credible and damning. And these two, Bigthan and Teresh, they get exactly what they deserve, and their end comes. And Mordecai has saved the king. Mordecai has done something historically monumental. Mordecai has done something monumentally significant in the eyes of God because he was at the right place and at the right time. However, doing something that's monumentally significant in the eyes of God, the formula for it is not just being in the right place at the right time. The formula for doing something monumentally significant in the eyes of God is being at the right place at the right time with the right character, with the right conscience, with the right convictions. Because without the right convictions, the right character, the right conscience, you can't take full advantage of being in the right place at the right time. You can make a great waste out of God putting you in the right place at the right time without the right convictions and the right conscience and the right character. Suppose it was a cowardly man in Mordecai's place who had stumbled into these plans and had opportunity to say something, but yet was paralyzed by fear, did nothing, and the result is that the king is taken out. In a situation like that, what happens to Esther? What becomes of Esther? Well, at worst, she's dead too, because when there's a coup and there's an overthrow of power, usually the ouster, the rebel who ousts the sitting power, is going to purge every last vestige of tie to the old king, including family, including the closest family, including spouses. And sometimes the wife gets it too, and the queen gets it too. But at minimum, there's going to be a new king with his own wife already. And Esther's going to be kicked to the curb. And Mordecai's going to be kicked to the curb. And then who is strategically in place to thwart Haman's bigger plot? Haman's more lethal, more fatal ethnic cleansing and genocide that he has plotted? Nobody. And so God kept Ahasuerus alive to keep Mordecai and Esther in place because God is always a step ahead. And he was a step ahead right there. God saved the king, number 2, but Mordecai went unthanked. God saved the king, but Mordecai went unthanked, at least for 4.5 years. This king did not know how blessed he was. And before I beat him up too much, do I even know how blessed I am? Do you even know the extent? We know the tip of the iceberg, and that's it, as to how blessed we really are. But man, he didn't know. Mordecai's mindset. He could have viewed and perceived Persia as just another foreign oppressor to be overthrown at all costs. Mordecai could have seen himself, he could have placed himself into the book of Judges and said, you know what, I don't care if it's Babylon, I don't care if it's Persia, I don't care if it's the Moabites, I don't care if it's the Philistines, I don't care who the oppressor is, we're to throw them off. They're just a hostile power, and we are the kingdom of Judah. And so this opportunity for Esther to be queen, she will be a puppet, and we will use Esther as a Trojan horse to infiltrate and to subvert and to sabotage the Persian Empire from within. We've got a mole. We've got a royal mole with a royal crown. That's what we'll do. No, he didn't do that. Mordecai and Esther submitted to and served Persia to the best of their ability. Why? Because Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had set that precedent before them with Persia and with Babylon to serve and submit to that power. Why did they do it? Because they were obeying the words of Jeremiah. Jeremiah had given those words verbally and given that command verbally, and he had written it down. And Daniel had it in writing, and the Jews of Esther's day in Persia had it in writing. They had the book of Jeremiah in writing. They were obeying the words of God in submitting to. So Ahasuerus gets a queen and an administrator, a bureaucrat, who are truly serving his empire, who are not seeking to topple it. In fact, they're serving him by removing this threat. So the king ought to be gushing over Mordecai, and he will. But for now, right now, the king ought to be, you just saved my life. Great job. I'm glad my head is still attached to my shoulders. I'm glad those guys are the ones on the gallows and not me. Boy, let's put a medal around your neck. Let's give you the key to the city. Let's really gush over Mordecai publicly. Let's give him, does this king see the value in rewarding loyalty to the empire? Yes. The historian Herodotus tells us that King Ahasuerus would hear and see of Persian captains performing great military exploits in battle, and he would go to great lengths to inquire as to their family name and who their father was and where they were from, and he would ensure that it gets written down in the chronicles so that they could be properly rewarded. He valued service and loyalty to the Persian Empire very highly, but yet Mordecai doesn't get a word of it. He doesn't get a single attaboy. He doesn't get a single pat on the back. He doesn't get a single public word of commendation. He gets none of that whatsoever, just like Joseph. Remember, Mordecai and Esther are following in the precedent set by Joseph and Daniel that we saw that last time. And remember, Joseph foretells of the butler's restoration. Remember me. I'm stuck here. Remember me, and I was right. And I encouraged you, and I told you that I put you in good standing with Pharaoh because I told you what was going to happen. Remember me. And what happens? Butler forgets him. Butler forgets all about him, and he doesn't get a word of commendation. He doesn't get a word of compliment. He doesn't get thanked at all. So why, if the king is so big on rewarding loyalty and Mordecai is so loyal, why doesn't the king publicly thank Mordecai right here and now? Well, there's a couple possibilities. One would be that maybe he just was never told of this. It was certified in the books, and this trial was done, and they just don't bother the king with every little trifle of public affairs. Our president is not conversant with every single case before the Supreme Court, every single case that takes place, every single law on the floor of Congress. One person can't be a part of absolutely everything, and maybe they deliberately, his handlers, deliberately kept it from him to insulate him from the stress. Maybe they felt like he's already unpredictable, he's already volatile, he's already paranoid. We'd rather he not find out that somebody's trying to kill him. We're not sure we want to deal with him once he finds out that somebody's trying to kill him. He's going to be on edge. So let's just not tell him. Let's just keep that from him. That may be what happened. Another possibility would be that he did know that an attempt was made on his life and an assassination was planned, but because of Esther's discretion in reducing the fanfare and because of Esther's carrying out his request to make little of it and to downplay it and to keep him off the radar screen and to keep his profile low and just to don't get his name out there any more than necessary, very little was made of Mordecai's role in it. So perhaps the king, okay, great. I'm glad somebody found out that these guys were trying to get me. He didn't really ask who it was. He didn't really look for a name. He was just glad to still be alive. The point is, how, as we make application, how do you do with going unthanked? To what extent does it bother you when you are unthanked? Because that is a great gauge, and that will reveal your integrity or lack thereof. How do I do and how do I feel when I remain unthanked? If you do good things, but you're embittered by not being complimented, lauded, applauded, gushed over, then you didn't do good things for God. You did good things for you. If it bothers you that you're not recognized and celebrated and praised, then you did good things to get attention for you and to get compliments for you. You didn't do good things for God. It's an excellent gauge of our character. And who is it that's after applause and accolades and compliments and attention and credit? It's Haman. It's not Mordecai. It's Haman. So if that's what I'm after, then I'm more of a Haman than I am a Mordecai. I'm more of a troublemaker than I am a trouble solver. If that's really what I'm most after, Mordecai is the one who understands, even if no human sees this, even if all humans miss this, God doesn't miss this. God will not forget this. God will not miss this. God says, good shall be repaid. Proverbs 13:21. Good shall be repaid. So I will do good, and I trust that God will see and be honored. And it did end up being a good thing for Mordecai to remain relatively anonymous and not have a big public ceremony called in his name to hang a key around his neck and to put a medal on him, because if that did put him on the radar screen, if all of that happened, he would be getting all this attention. Suppose there was a third or fourth or fifth conspirator that had not yet been named. Now they know exactly who the snitch is. They could still get him. How many co-conspirators had agreed not to eat until Paul was dead? More than 40. We've only got 2 here. Is it possible there's 7, 9? Sure. So for Mordecai, going unthanked was good. It helped save his life. It may have preserved his own life himself. Number 3, God saved the king. Number 3, at the perfect time. At the perfect time. Good for Mordecai that 4.5 years later, he will be recognized for this, and he will be given his flowers for it, but not until the right time. Because God is always providentially a step ahead. He is always a step ahead. What if Mordecai did get the big ceremony right here and the big accolades and the big, we're going to give you, you'll never pay for a meal in the city again, and we want your name on every poster, and not only would maybe some other co-conspirators know who their target is, but in addition to that, and we will address this a bit more thoroughly next time, in chapter 3, verse 1, we find that Haman's promotion, Haman's advancement, Haman being raised to maybe second in command is very suspiciously timed up with Bigthan and Teresh's conviction and Mordecai's relative anonymity. These guys got busted. The king's life got saved. Nobody really knows a whole lot about Mordecai's role because it's been downplayed. And then Haman is suddenly promoted. Might Haman have found a way to wiggle into some credit for what Mordecai had actually done? We will look into that a little bit further next time. But along that line, if that is partly what produced Haman's rise to power, well, if Haman never rises, then Haman never almost wipes out all the Jews. And, well, that'd be a good thing, right? I mean, all the Jews would be safe and sound and intact with no problems. They'd be all good, and that would be a good thing. Well, yes, but God almost allowed the Jews to be wiped out for a reason. He deliberately almost allowed the Jews to be wiped out. What was his reason? To call attention to his work in intervening to preserve the line of the promised Messiah and to keep his promises to us intact. He was calling attention to his attachment and his commitment to those promises by almost allowing them to be thwarted. Think of it this way. If there was no Haman, if there's no Haman, no rise of Haman, then there's no plot to annihilate the Jews, and then there's no crisis narrowly averted, and then there's no story here. There's no book of Esther. There's nothing to see here. There's nothing interesting. There's not a huge turn of events and an example of providence. There's no book of Esther, and from the book of Esther, we get two of our greatest examples of courage in the Bible, who continue to inspire courage and integrity even in us. We're deprived of them without this book, without this narrowly avoided crisis and disaster, and we would not want to be deprived of them, and then we would also be deprived of one of God's greatest demonstrations of his commitment to his promises. One of his greatest demonstrations of his commitment to preserving the line of his promised Messiah, that he will intervene. He demonstrates his commitment to intervening and orchestrating events because he is a keeper of promises. He's saying, hey, I want you to see the lengths I go to ensure that you've got promises to stand on, so that 3,000 years, 2,500 years later, you can still be singing about standing on those promises because not one has been broken. I want you to see what I'm doing. I'm going to let it almost get broken so you'll appreciate the promise that you have, because without it being almost taken, we would take it for granted. And we would take for granted the great work of God in giving us just the Savior we needed, just the exact fulfillment of every promise that we needed, because sinners like us seldom appreciate things until they're almost taken from us. Until they are taken from us, and better yet, until they're almost taken from us. The great chapter of Luke 15, the woman's coin, her dowry, her fortune, it's lost, and there's rejoicing when it's found. Whew! She almost lost it. Is it then more precious to her from thenceforth because of this almost being without it? Yeah. She appreciates it more now. The king, the man, the father, who almost had his son taken from him, but he gets his son back. Does he now appreciate his son more? Is his son more precious to him, his son having been almost taken from him? Yes. I had a heart attack. Is life more precious to me now because I almost lost my life? Do I appreciate it more? Yes. Is it agonizing to go through the emotional roller coaster of almost losing your fortune, almost losing your son, almost losing your life? Yes, it is agonizing, but if it boosts your appreciation for what you have dramatically, then those things become more precious to you, hence the drama here. Hence the drama that we find in this great book of the Bible. Mordecai is appointed to this post just in time to discover this conspiracy. Perhaps it was 13 minutes that made the difference. Perhaps it was the 13 minutes that he chose to take his lunch break. That just like the 13 minutes of Hitler's speech that made the difference to change the course of history. Now, how is this for timing? Do you know how, now, of course, extra biblical history is not infallible. We understand that. However, some historians are more credible than others. Many credible historians of the Persian Empire, and there's tons of documentation. The Persian Empire is one of the most chronicled. It tells us they had chronicles. The records are extensive. We have very little question. So many sources attest. We have very little question. How did this king die? Obviously, he hasn't been alive ever since then. This attempt on his life failed. Would one ever succeed? Yes. 14 years later, do you know how he died? By assassination from within by two of his own ministers who are keepers of his own chamber. In his bed, in his chambers. Almost exactly like the plot that almost got him. But God said, no, Big Thin, no Tiresh, not this time. Maybe 14 years from now, you're not going to get him, I'm going to get you. Not yet. It's not time yet. I've got promises to keep. I've got my people with the right character, the right conscience, the right convictions, and I am going to put them in the right place and the right time. God is saying, hey guys, hey goons, I am a step ahead of you. And God was a step ahead of them for us, to keep his promises to us for our redemption. How beautiful is that? Isn't this fun? The promises of God, absolutely worth reflecting on, examining. How is our appreciation for them? Let's boost it. Let's put a dramatic boost into our appreciation of the commitment that our God has to keeping his promises, giving us just the Savior we needed. Lord, we love you. We thank you for thy word. It's powerful. Lord, may we learn a lesson on integrity. Lord, doing the right thing, there is a cost to it, but it does come back around to pay off. It's usually later on. And here Mordecai learned that there is a reward to doing right. It often comes later. But Lord, we agonize over things and doing what's right. And just please, Lord, develop in us that conscience and that conviction and the character that pleases you. May it not be for applause. Lord, anything in us that wants to do good so that we can be seen, so that we can be celebrated, Lord, you hate pride. Get that out of us. Get the Haman out of us. And we're going to continue to ask you to get that Haman out of us over these next 8 chapters. And Lord, help us to be ever more thankful for and cherishing of all of the promises that you kept to give us just the Savior we needed. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.